Never throw stones at a quiet storm. By the time you realize it's not just rain, it's already too late. My dear chosen ones, lean in. This one's for you. Let's get one thing straight from the jump. Making you an enemy will go down in their story as the biggest, loudest, most ridiculous mistake they ever made. That's not a warning. That's a spoiler. Because this is what happens when people let their ego pick a fight their soul can't survive. They didn't just cross a line. They crossed into a battlefield they were never built for. They thought you were soft because you didn't bark back. They mistook your silence for surrender. They saw your grace as weakness, your stillness as fear, and your peace as a performance. But what they didn't understand, what they'll never understand, is that you weren't quiet because you had nothing to say. You were quiet because you were preparing for the kind of comeback that doesn't just end the story, it rewrites the genre. You see, chosen ones don't chase chaos. We become the lesson. And sometimes the hardest pill your enemies will ever swallow is realizing you were the test they failed in front of everyone. They didn't just make a mistake. They made a monument to their own downfall, and your name is etched into it in bold letters. They wanted a war. Well, now they're getting one with karma as your co-pilot and reality delivering every blow they thought they were immune to. And some of you might be wondering, why me? Why does it always have to be me that gets dragged through the dirt? Let me tell you why, chosen one. Because you carry weight they can't measure. Because your presence alone shifts atmospheres and rattles whatever fake peace they built on lies and illusions. Because you remind them of what they gave up: integrity, purpose, depth, alignment. And instead of elevating with you, they tried to erase you. But you can't erase what was never written in pencil. Before we dive deeper, if this message is already lighting something up inside you, do us a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It might seem like a small gesture, but it means everything to us. It's what keeps this movement alive, and it's how we keep bringing you the kind of raw, empowering, and life-shifting content that speaks truth, fuels your power, and reminds you exactly who you are. Your support helps us stay loud for the quiet ones, strong for the healing ones, and real for the chosen ones. Let's grow this energy together. They tried to break you and call it discipline, tried to ruin your name and call it honesty, tried to isolate you and call it boundaries. But now their story is falling apart while yours is just beginning its rise. They lit a fire under you thinking it would burn you to ash. But chosen ones, you were never made of paper. That fire, it forged you. They laughed while you bled in silence, smiled while you picked up pieces they shattered. But here's the twist they never saw coming. You didn't just survive, you upgraded. You leveled up so hard, the version of you they hurt no longer exists. And now, all their efforts are chasing a ghost, someone who's already evolved beyond recognition. Here's what they forgot. When a chosen one is pushed to the edge, we don't fall, we fly. And while they're busy watching your wings from a distance they created, they're realizing, too late, that what they tried to destroy has become the very force that will haunt their regrets. Not out of vengeance, out of evolution. This isn't about being better than them. It's about becoming so unshakably you, so unapologetically aligned, that their entire attack becomes pointless in hindsight. That's the real karma. Watching you rise while everything they built off your pain turns to dust in their hands. And no, karma doesn't come with a big entrance. It moves in like a shadow, quiet, steady, relentless. It doesn't need a schedule. It doesn't need a witness. It just needs a trigger, and making you an enemy. That was the trigger. That was the moment their timeline split in two, before they underestimated you and after they paid the price. So sit tall, chosen ones. This isn't just a moment. It's a turning point, a shift, a revelation. You don't need to clear your name. You are the clarity. You don't need revenge. You are the result. You don't need to explain what they did. Life's already putting subtitles on their consequences. They'll look back one day, months, years, lifetimes from now, and they'll remember that one decision. The moment they thought attacking you would somehow elevate them. The moment they thought trying to break someone unbreakable would come without cost. They'll remember. Oh, they'll remember. And that memory, it'll be louder than any apology they never gave. Because when you make a chosen one your enemy, you don't just lose a battle, you declare war on every blessing you were once connected to. And from that point forward, nothing feels right ever again. So raise your chin, chosen one. Your enemies aren't just regretting you, they're reliving you. You became their consequence, and that's the part they'll never escape. Now let's get into it. And to every real one still here, you, the chosen one, this is your moment. Whether you've been walking this path alone or just stepped into your power, your presence right now is no accident. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or made out to be the villain for simply being real, then this message was written in your energy. So do what chosen ones do. Own your space. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop the number 88 in the comments if you know making you an enemy was their biggest mistake yet. And if you feel called to go further, show some love through super thanks. It helps us keep dropping this raw, no-filter truth. And now, let's get into it step by step. And believe me, if you're truly chosen, you'll feel it in your bones. These aren't just words, they're mirrors. You've lived this. Ordinary minds can't decode this kind of power. But you were born for it. Let's get started. Number 1. They launched a war without reading the warning label. They picked a fight with a storm wearing headphones. And now they're drowning in the silence. They thought you were alone. They didn't realize you were the army. My dear chosen ones, let's make one thing loud and clear. They didn't just come for you, they came for a force they were never built to handle. And the silence they mistook for weakness? That was just the calm before a collapse they scripted with their own hands. They saw you walking solo and thought, easy target. You didn't respond to their petty shots, didn't engage in their low-vibration tactics, and they convinced themselves you had no backup, no armor, no power behind you. But what they failed to realize is this. Power doesn't always make noise. Real power watches, waits, moves with precision, and hits where it hurts the most, when it's too late to recover. They started a war thinking they were throwing punches at a punching bag, but what they hit was a pressure bomb built from silence, resilience, and lessons they never studied. Chosen one, you weren't unarmed, you were unbothered. And that's exactly why their attacks bounced off you like paper darts at steel. You ever notice how the most dangerous storms don't announce themselves? They show up when skies look calm. They hit hardest when the enemy's guard is down. That's what your energy did. While they were plotting, mocking, talking, you were staying grounded, focused, unshaken. And that triggered something they couldn't see. A slow unraveling, a dismantling of their comfort zone, one misstep at a time. And now, everything they built on your name is cracking under its own lies. You didn't need to scream. You didn't need to post. You didn't even need to clap back. Because chosen ones don't do theatrics, they do transformation. And by the time your silence spoke, it was already too late for them to undo the damage they caused themselves. They weren't just throwing dirt on your name, they were digging their own hole with it. See, they assumed absence meant abandonment. They thought no one had your back. But let's get real. Just because the backup doesn't post selfies doesn't mean it's not there. Your strength came layered, invisible to most, incomprehensible to those who never learned to carry pain without folding. They didn't understand the art of strategic silence. how choosing not to react is a reaction in itself. They called you cold, emotionless, weak. But what you were doing, chosen one, was calculating, conserving, watching the clock wind down on their false confidence. Now they're asking questions. Why is nothing working anymore? Why does every win turn sour? Why is peace so hard to hold on to? And the answer is simple. Because the moment they came for you, they activated a chain reaction that only ends one way. With them watching everything around them slip through their fingers. That's not misfortune, that's feedback. Let them call it bad luck. Let them blame Mercury in retrograde or a toxic environment. But deep down, they know. They feel it in the pit of their chest, in the restless nights, in the way doors are closing that used to swing wide open. That's not just life, that's consequence, tailor-made, interest-packed, and arriving right on time. And here's where you rise. Because while their world is unraveling, you are stabilizing, you're building, you're glowing, you're becoming the exact version of yourself they swore would never exist. You know why? Because chosen ones don't get distracted by the noise. They become the lesson when it's time. You are the blueprint they tried to tear apart, and now they're realizing they had no idea how to read the code in the first place. Let this sink in. They weren't just beefing with a person. They were poking at a frequency that doesn't tolerate foolishness. And now, they're learning that what you don't respond to still responds without you. That's the part that cuts deepest. The realization that they brought their own downfall in the same breath they used to insult your name. So to every chosen one listening, feel this. Your power isn't in how loud you clap back. It's in how real you stay while everything they built on your downfall crumbles in front of them. You don't need to fight for validation. You are the validation. Your life is proof. Your peace is the punishment. Your growth is the revenge. And to the ones who declared war, thinking they were swinging at shadows, congratulations. You didn't just make an enemy. You made a mistake that history won't forget. Because this isn't just karma, it's poetic justice. And you're the plot twist. Number 2. Their envy blinded them to the gift they couldn't buy or fake. They tried to dim what they couldn't understand. Now your light burns straight through their shadows. They didn't hate you, chosen one. They hated their own reflection in your light. My dear chosen ones, this one cuts deep, because it wasn't hate that made them act the way they did. Not at first. It was jealousy dressed as sarcasm, envy masked as criticism, insecurity wrapped in fake support. They saw something in you they couldn't name, couldn't replicate, couldn't touch. And instead of honoring it, they tried to kill it with their confusion. You didn't walk in loud. You didn't force your energy on anyone. You simply were. And that was the problem. Your presence, without saying a word, held up a mirror they weren't ready to look into. You didn't trigger them because you were doing too much. You triggered them because you were doing you effortlessly. And their ego couldn't stand it. They told themselves you were fake, too confident, too deep, too intense, too different. And yeah, you are. You were never meant to blend in. Chosen ones don't come with a dimmer switch, and that's what tore them apart. You showed up glowing with something they hadn't found in themselves. And instead of asking how you got there, they tried to drag you back into the same cage they were stuck in. Let's be real. They never actually believed you were better than them. They just couldn't handle that you didn't need their approval to shine. That's what did it. The fact that you were unapologetically whole while they were pretending not to fall apart. That your calm was real, not rehearsed. Your depth was lived, not copied. Your aura, untouchable. They saw the assignment on you but didn't know how to read it, so they scribbled over it with lies and rumors, told others you were too much, told themselves you were acting brand new. But here's what they'll never admit. You reminded them of what they could be if they weren't so committed to staying broken. And rather than evolve, they decided to compete. But here's the kicker. You weren't even in the race. You weren't trying to win against them. You were trying to win back yourself, and that alone was enough to make them spiral. They saw you walking into rooms without needing the spotlight, building quietly, healing loudly through your actions, not your words. And all of it made them uncomfortable, not because you did anything wrong, but because their soul knew you were the real thing, and their mask couldn't survive next to it. And now they're stuck watching the same light they tried to dim rise higher without them. Every win you collect, every level you reach, every ounce of peace you hold, it screams what they didn't want to believe. You were never the problem. They were just too proud to sit at your table and learn. They had a choice, elevation or envy, growth or gossip. But they chose the easy route. They chose shade, hoping it would cast doubt over your shine. But they forgot. Your light doesn't come from trends, applause, or validation. It comes from pressure, from pain, from everything they never survived. That's why it's so potent, so rare, so impossible to fake. You weren't sent to humble them. You were sent to wake them. You carried the energy of transformation, of opportunity, of evolution. Just being near you could have leveled them up. But instead of reaching for your energy, they reached for your downfall. And now, karma's doing the math. It's not revenge, it's return. They poured hate into someone who was meant to pour healing into them. They blocked the very path that could have saved them. And now they're watching the train leave without them. Ticket in hand, door shut, no re-entry. And chosen one, let this be your fuel. You don't need to prove anything. Your life is the proof. The same ones who said you were doing too much are now exhausted trying to keep up with your growth. The same ones who said you were trying too hard are now trying everything and still can't match your peace. Because here's the truth. You carry a kind of shine that doesn't flicker when people stop clapping. You carry a kind of depth that can't be swayed by surface-level drama. And you've got a calling that doesn't need confirmation from anyone outside of you. So if they're watching from the sidelines now, let them. If they're whispering your name in rooms they used to block you from, good. That means the lesson has arrived. And the lesson is this: trying to kill what was meant to awaken you only guarantees that you stay asleep. But you, chosen one, you didn't fall into that trap. You kept rising, you stayed grounded, you didn't clap back, you climbed. And now you're standing in everything they swore you'd never reach. Let them sit in their confusion while you sit in your clarity. Let them drown in their doubt while you sail forward in alignment. Because your glow isn't revenge, it's revelation. And that, right there, is a karma they'll feel every time they see your name. So walk louder, shine brighter. You were never too much, they were just too limited. And now that your light's expanding, they finally see it. Too bad it's from the outside looking in. Number 3, they walked away from the bridge meant to save them. They fumbled the realest one they'll ever meet. Now the door is closed, bolted, and gone. Some people don't realize they just walked away from a lifeline until they're drowning with no one left to blame. My dear chosen ones, this one cuts deep. Not because it broke you, but because you finally see it for what it was. You weren't just a person in their life. You were the upgrade they didn't deserve, the alignment they didn't recognize, the mirror they couldn't face. And when they turned their back on you, they weren't just walking away from someone who showed up with truth, peace, and presence. They were walking out on the one connection that could have shifted their entire story. Let that sink in. They thought you were disposable, just another name, just another face, someone who would orbit around their chaos until they decided they needed your light again. But what they didn't understand is that you were a one-time access pass to a version of life they couldn't reach alone. You weren't background noise. You were the signal. You didn't show up to compete. You showed up to complete. You brought healing to their heavy, structure to their confusion. You didn't need to manipulate to be heard. You didn't need to beg to be felt. You simply arrived, whole, clear, and steady, and that in itself shook them. And that's what made them run. Because people who are addicted to chaos don't know how to sit still in peace. They saw your calm as a threat, your clarity as control, your consistency as confrontation. You didn't even raise your voice, and still your energy screamed truth. And when someone's life is built on performance, masks, and manipulation, your authenticity feels like an attack. So what did they do? They pushed you away, dismissed you, betrayed you, made it look like you were the problem, too real, too intense, too deep, too much. But really, you were just too aligned for the version of themselves they were pretending to be. And instead of growing with you, they chose to ghost you. Instead of evolving, they chose ego. And now they're stuck in the exact same cycles you were sent to break. That's the part they'll never admit. You weren't there to control them. You weren't there to fix them. You were there to reflect back what needed to heal. You were peace in the middle of their emotional storm, a moment of stillness in their internal noise. You didn't come demanding anything, but your presence required truth, and they weren't ready for it. So they called you crazy, called you controlling, said you were too much. But let's call it what it was. They were just too small to hold what you carried. They didn't see the value because they've never been exposed to it. When someone's used to fast food energy, they don't know what to do when a 5-star connection walks into the room. So they sabotage, they ghost, they discard, and by the time they realize what they did, it's already gone. Because, chosen one, you don't stay where you're not seen. You don't beg to be understood by someone who only listens to their pride. You don't lower your frequency to fit into spaces that can't breathe your truth. You left not out of bitterness, but out of balance. You stopped pouring into someone who never had the capacity to hold you. And that was the most powerful decision you could have made. And here's the twist. They're feeling it now. The disconnection, the shift. The silence that doesn't come with options. They don't know what's missing, but they know something's off. The conversations aren't hitting the same. The people around them feel shallow. The energy is dull. Because the light you brought into their world, it wasn't just rare. It was irreplaceable. And no, this isn't about being better than them. This is about being what was best for them and being treated like a burden anyway. You were the plug, and they cut the cord. Now, they're stuck trying to recharge off people who don't even know where the outlet is. But here's what they don't know. Once grace leaves, it doesn't come back through the same door. You weren't a revolving door they could walk in and out of. You weren't a trial version of real connection. You were it, the genuine article, the upgrade, the elevation. And they slammed the door on it thinking they could always knock later. But some doors don't open twice. So no, you're not punishing them. You're just no longer available. They burned the bridge thinking they had a backup route. But you weren't a detour. You were the destination. And now they're circling, stuck, haunted by the realization that what they walked away from was the only real thing they ever had. Chosen ones understand this. Being the blessing doesn't mean you're obligated to stay where you're mishandled. Your presence is power, but it's not charity. And if someone can't recognize it when they have it, they don't deserve access to it when it's gone. Let them sit in the void they created, because while they're trying to fill the space you used to heal, you've already leveled up into rooms where your worth isn't questioned. It's respected. Number 4. Your calm exposed the storms they tried to hide. Your peace was so loud it screamed over their chaos, and that's what broke them. They didn't hate what you did, they hated what you didn't have. the demons they've been feeding for years. My dear chosen ones, let this hit deep. Sometimes the only thing you ever did wrong was exist without dysfunction. That's it. That's the reason they turned on you. You didn't lie, cheat, manipulate, or tear anyone down. You didn't compete for attention, stir up drama, or wear 1,000 masks just to be liked. You just walked in rooms with authenticity, with calm, with clarity, and that alone felt like an attack to people who've spent their entire lives hiding from themselves. You triggered the hell out of them, not because you were toxic, but because you weren't. Your stillness made them squirm, your boundaries made them rage, your silence made them spiral, because people who are at war with themselves can't stand to be around someone who's already made peace. You didn't come to expose their demons, but your very presence held up a mirror they couldn't avoid. And that reflection, it wasn't pretty. It showed them the lies they tell, the masks they wear, the broken parts they've never healed. And rather than own it, they projected it. They labeled you the threat. Why? Because you represented something they weren't ready to face, wholeness. You weren't playing chess with them. You weren't in some emotional war, you were just being. And that rattled them. Your ability to remain calm when they threw chaos your way. That shook them to the core. They wanted you reactive. They wanted you loud, messy, defensive. Because if they could pull you into their storm, it would validate their dysfunction. But you didn't move. You didn't crack. You didn't stoop. You weren't matching energy, you were protecting yours. And don't get it twisted, they studied you, they watched you closely. Not because they loved you, but because they wanted to figure out what made you unbreakable. They couldn't understand how you maintained your peace in a world that runs on noise. They couldn't fathom how you never folded when life came for you. But that's because they didn't see what it took for you to become this version of you. The version that doesn't flinch anymore. The version that doesn't beg to be understood. They thought your calm was fake. But let's be clear, your calm was earned. It came from walking through fire they wouldn't have survived. From choosing to heal when it was easier to hate. From learning that not reacting isn't weakness, it's power. And that power, it unsettled them because it exposed everything they were pretending to be. You didn't play games. You didn't manipulate the narrative. You didn't craft lies to gain sympathy. You simply stood tall, moved silently, stayed aligned. And that's why they had to turn you into the villain. Because if they didn't, they'd have to admit that the issue was never you, it was them. And here's what's wild. They didn't just try to hurt you. They tried to erase you, tried to discredit your peace, paint your boundaries as arrogance, twist your stillness into cowardice. But chosen one, their story doesn't change your truth. And now, that truth is louder than ever. Not because you shouted, but because your results are too real to ignore. They're still talking, still circling the same cycles, still trying to get a reaction. But you're rising. You're thriving in the space they swore you'd never reach. You're untouched by their chaos, unshaken by their bitterness, unbothered by their noise. You were never the problem. You were just the proof. The living, breathing proof that peace exists, that healing is real, that growth is possible without destroying others to get it. And they couldn't handle that. Now they're left sitting in the very storm they hoped would drown you, replaying every moment, every projection, every attempt to drag you into their darkness, and watching in disbelief as you move further and further into your light. They didn't lose you because you changed. They lost you because they refused to. So, to every chosen one listening, never feel guilty for the peace you carry. You earned that. You built that. And if it rattles their demons, so be it. That's not your burden to hold. Let them wrestle with the reflection. Let them feel the weight of what they refuse to heal. Because at the end of the day, their discomfort is just confirmation. You are the very thing they wish they could be, whole. And next time someone tries to dim your light because it highlights their shadow, just smile. Not out of spite, but because deep down, you know, they never stood a chance against someone who mastered peace in a world addicted to chaos. And that, chosen one, is why making you an enemy wasn't just a mistake. It was the crack that let karma walk right through their front door. Number 5. They turned love into a weapon. Now it won't even look their way. They played Cupid with a loaded gun. Now love treats them like a stranger. They called it love. You lived it. And that difference? That's why they lost you, and everything that came with you. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about the kind of betrayal that doesn't leave scars on your skin. It leaves echoes in your soul. They didn't just lie, they performed. They watched how you loved, how you moved, how you poured, how you gave. And instead of rising to meet your energy, they studied it like a script, memorized your softness, mirrored your kindness, rehearsed your dreams just enough to fool you into thinking they belonged in them. But they never belonged. They weren't building love, they were building a stage. And you, chosen one, were the only one not acting. They wanted the warmth of your fire without ever learning how to hold it. They craved the light, the peace, the healing you gave without hesitation. But instead of protecting it, they exploited it. What you called love, they saw as leverage. What you gave freely, they treated like currency. It wasn't connection, it was consumption. Let's be real, you didn't show up halfway. You weren't guarding pieces of yourself, waiting to see how much they'd give. No, you gave it all, and they knew exactly what kind of power that held. That's why they tried to bottle it, control it, own it. But here's the truth they'll choke on forever. You can't fake alignment with someone who's built from authenticity. They wore your love like a mask, but masks slip. And when theirs did, what you saw wasn't a soulmate, it was a strategy. It wasn't a connection. It was control, wrapped in sweet words, and just enough attention to keep you hopeful. They wanted your loyalty without building trust. They demanded your softness without offering safety. They wanted access to your energy like it was a subscription they never had to pay for. And the whole time they mistook your presence as a given, not realizing your love was the gift. But chosen one, when you walked away, you didn't just take your body. You took the atmosphere, you took the clarity, the grounding, the healing, the sense of being understood in a way they never were before you. Because your presence doesn't just fill a room, it recalibrates it. Now they're scrambling, trying to recreate what you gave without even understanding what it was. They can mimic the relationship, copy the words, try to rebuild the rhythm, but it falls flat. You know why? Because energy doesn't lie. What you gave can't be faked, and what they lost can't be replaced. They thought they were clever. They thought love was a tool, and you were just another project. But now they're realizing that love remembers, not in words, but in energy, and it doesn't return to the hands that dropped it for entertainment. Here's what hurts them most. You're not bitter. You're not online throwing shade. You're not chasing closure. You're just gone, quietly, completely, powerfully gone. And the silence? It's louder than anything you could have said. And yes, they'll try again, with someone new, with someone naive, but it won't work. Every I love you will feel off. Every connection will feel thinner than air, because once you've experienced real, fake feels like static. And you, chosen one, were the realest thing they ever touched, and the only thing they'll never touch again. And maybe they don't show it. Maybe they're still pretending, still posting, still smiling in public, but energy tells a different story. Behind every shallow laugh, every staged photo, every awkward connection is the residue of what they did to you. And that energy, it haunts. Now they walk through life with a curse of their own creation, not because you're punishing them, but because love doesn't live where betrayal sleeps. They burned the blueprint, and now they're shocked they can't build anything real. And if you're sitting there, chosen one, asking, why me? Why did they play me like that when all I did was love them right? Here's your answer: because you're rare. And rare terrifies people who've only known transactional love. You weren't just a partner, you were a healer. You didn't just offer romance, you offered restoration. You cracked open a version of peace they didn't think existed, and instead of protecting that, they poisoned it. But don't regret it. Don't shrink because of it. Because your love was never the problem. Their ability to receive it was, and what they called too much will be the exact thing they'll spend years craving and never feel again. Because chosen love is not something you audition for. It's not something you steal. It's something you align with. And they were never built for alignment. They were built for manipulation, and they lost you in the process. Let that be their punishment. Let your peace be your loudest proof. And walk forward knowing this. They weaponized love like a game, but you were the win, and they just played themselves. Number 6, they traded growth for the temporary high of an ego trip. They chose to flex for a moment and fumbled a lifetime. They traded the long game for a loud moment. Now the silence is forever. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about the high cost of cheap pride. Because this is what happens when someone throws away gold just to be seen holding glitter. They didn't lose you. Let's get that straight. They lost access to a timeline that could have transformed their entire existence. And all for what? A temporary ego boost? A fake sense of power? Applause from people who don't even matter? They weren't ready for your truth, so they laughed. They weren't built for your wisdom, so they mocked. But deep down, they knew. The things you said, the energy you brought, the vision you held, it wasn't delusion, it was direction. You weren't trying to control them. You were handing them keys to doors they didn't even know existed. And because they were too wrapped up in how things looked, they missed the whole point of what you were. They couldn't recognize the value in front of them, so they played over it like it was disposable. What they didn't realize? You weren't offering validation, you were offering elevation. And now, that offer's expired. Chosen ones, hear me on this. You were never just a connection, you were a catalyst. Your presence was a turning point, one they didn't even know they needed. But instead of leaning in, they leaned out. Instead of listening, they laughed. And instead of leveling up with you, they chose to perform for people who wouldn't even show up if the lights went out. And for what? To feel bigger in a room full of small minds. Let me break it down. Some people will choose their ego over evolution every time. They'll rather feel powerful than be powerful. They'll rather look right than grow. And that's why they failed the test. You didn't show up to control their path. You showed up to unlock it, but they couldn't see past their pride long enough to accept the blueprint. So they threw it away, and now they're building on broken ground. They thought pushing you away was a power move. They thought mocking your insight made them bold. But let's be real, those laughs, that arrogance, that was insecurity wearing confidence like a costume. Because when truth hits too close to home, the easiest reaction is to dismiss the messenger. But chosen ones understand this. Just because they couldn't receive you doesn't mean you were wrong. It means they were never ready. And now they're living with the fallout, quietly, secretly, regretfully, because the truth always echoes loudest when the room goes silent. And right now, they're sitting in the silence of their own choices. The doors they were meant to walk through, closed. The growth they could have shared in, missed. The connection that could have shifted everything, gone. No, this isn't about revenge. This is about recognition. They didn't just fumble a person, they fumbled their future. The access you gave them wasn't casual, it was rare, and that kind of access doesn't come back just because they now realize what they lost. Some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt, not because you're bitter, but because not everything deserves a second pass. Let's be honest, they didn't just reject you. They rejected what could have been. They underestimated the price of disrespect. And now, they're bankrupt in the one area that can't be fixed with money, attention, or fake apologies: alignment. They stepped out of alignment the moment they chose to play over purpose. And once that train leaves, it doesn't circle back for late passengers. So, chosen ones, don't look back. Don't wonder if you should have stayed, explained, or tried harder. You were more than enough. You brought the vision, the depth, the potential, and they chose pride. They chose the crowd. They chose the applause of people who couldn't even comprehend what you were bringing to the table. Now the table is gone, and all they're left with is echoes of a version of you they'll never sit across from again. They thought their dismissal was strength, but the real strength was yours, in walking away from people too small to hold the weight of what you carried. You weren't difficult, you were different. And that difference was the doorway to the next level they'll never reach now, not because you shut them out, but because they never stepped in when they had the chance. Let this be the reminder. People who throw away diamonds to hold on to dust never win. It's not punishment. It's the price of playing games with people who were never meant to be played with. They wanted a moment of superiority. What they got was a lifetime of wondering, what if? So stand tall, chosen ones. You didn't lose anything, they did. And karma. Karma's not coming with fire and fury. Karma is already here, dressed as silence, missed opportunities, fading connections, and the realization that they let the best thing that ever crossed their path walk away untouched. Because when you bet against a chosen one, you don't just lose the hand, you fold your whole future. Number 7, they lied loud, but truth was listening the whole time. They built a throne on lies, and now they're being buried by the truth. They thought they were ahead of the game, but forgot. Lies don't age well. They rot in silence until they reek in public. Let's get into it, my dear chosen ones, because this one's not just about betrayal. It's about character assassination and your silent, powerful comeback. The kind that doesn't need noise, just time. The kind where the same crowd that clapped for their lies is now whispering about their downfall. See, they didn't just twist the truth, they engineered it. Precision manipulation, a full-blown performance. They weren't content with leaving you. No, they had to rewrite your story in a version where they wore the halo and you wore the horns. And the worst part? People bought it. Quickly, easily, no hesitation. Friends you trusted, family who claimed to know you, even strangers who never met you suddenly had opinions like they lived inside your story. But chosen one, hear this loud and clear. You didn't lose them. You were shown them. They called you unstable when all you did was refuse to be controlled. They labeled you arrogant when you finally drew a line in the sand. They said you were difficult because you stopped letting them play puppet master with your peace. Let that sink in. They didn't expose you. They exposed themselves by how quickly they needed to turn people against you to feel safe. And still, you didn't crack. You didn't run to clear your name. You let the lies live freely because you knew the truth doesn't panic. It just waits. See, people like that? They're not storytellers. They're survivalists. They manipulate the narrative to keep control, to keep admiration, to keep the spotlight off their shadows. And they thought your silence was consent. They thought if they told the story enough times, it would become the truth. But here's the part they never saw coming. The truth doesn't knock. It kicks the door open when it's good and ready. And when it does, it doesn't just correct the record, it exposes the whole operation. The lies, the strategy, the manipulation, the fake tears, the forced humility, the charm they used to sell a false reality. Now it's all unraveling. Slowly at first, yes, like a thread being tugged from a tightly woven lie, but inevitably, irrefutably, and the silence that once protected them, it's turned on them. The questions are starting, the inconsistencies are piling up, the mask is slipping, and what's behind it is nothing like the character they tried to play. You don't even need to say a word. Your calm is louder than any confrontation. Your peace is making people curious. Why haven't you cracked? Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you falling apart like they said you would? Because chosen ones don't need to fight for the truth. They are the truth. And now, their lies are choking them. The same words they used to tear you down are coming back with sharp edges. Every false narrative is now a weight tied to their own reputation. And as for the people they poisoned against you, some are circling back, quietly, with apologies, with shame, with, "I should have known better." And you don't need revenge, just memory, because now they have to live with the fact that they turned on someone who was real just because the fake one cried louder. Let this be your reminder, chosen one. When someone builds their power on perception, truth is their greatest enemy. And you became that truth. You are the slow burn that's revealing their entire stage play. You are the mirror they've been avoiding. And karma's not late. It's precise. It's surgical. It knows exactly when to hit, right after they've convinced themselves they got away with it. Now they're panicking behind smiles. They're unraveling in the same silence they once forced on you. They're feeling what you felt. Only difference is you built from it. They're breaking. So let them talk. Let them spin. Let them scramble to maintain the version of events that no longer holds up under scrutiny. And when the fallout finally levels the playing field, you won't even have to say, "I told you so." Your existence will be proof enough. They played with perception. But the truth plays the long game, and it always wins, every time. Number 8, you didn't bounce back, you came back bulletproof. They buried the body, but you came back with the blueprint. They thought you were the ending. You became the evidence. Oh, chosen ones, this is the part they never saw coming. They were so sure the damage they caused would be the final chapter in your story. They were convinced the pain would shut you down, that the betrayal would break your spirit, and that your silence meant defeat. They smiled while you bled, laughed while you stumbled, and slept peacefully thinking you'd never find your way back. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't even fathom, was that you weren't just built to survive. You were built to return with proof. They thought they were writing your ending, but all they did was hand you the pen. And now, you're the one holding the narrative, the receipts, and the power. You didn't crawl out of that pit to beg for understanding. You didn't come back for validation. You came back with facts, calm, collected, calculated. They thought time would erase what they did, but they underestimated how sharp your memory is when you've suffered in silence. You remember it all, not with bitterness, but with clarity, the kind of clarity that makes liars tremble. Chosen ones, you didn't just rise, you evolved. And that evolution is loud in the most haunting way, not through words, through presence, through peace, through the glow that now follows you into every room they swore you'd never enter again. You've got that quiet kind of power that doesn't announce itself, but when it shows up, it shifts the entire temperature. People feel it before they understand it. And the ones who tried to break you, they feel it the most. Because your very existence now convicts them. You see, they were counting on your silence, hoping you'd stay stuck in survival mode, too broken to speak, too tired to rise, too ashamed to show your face. But chosen ones don't stay buried. They transform under pressure. They sharpen under betrayal. And when they return, it's not just with strength. It's with undeniable evidence of everything they overcame. You are that evidence now. You are the walking contradiction to their version of the story. They told people you were unstable, that you were bitter, lost, insecure. But look at you now, grounded, focused, and vibrating at a level they can't reach, let alone replicate. You are the blueprint of a comeback they never studied for, the kind of comeback that can't be faked. They hoped time would make people forget, but every time you show up, better, bolder, clearer, the truth screams in their silence. You don't even have to say their names. The glow does it for you. The peace in your eyes, the power in your voice, the calm in your energy, all of it exposes what they tried to bury. You didn't drag them into the light. They're simply being burned by the reflection of your healing. And what's worse for them, you're not even bitter. You're not plotting revenge. You're not obsessing over their downfall. You're simply too elevated to care. That's the part that hurts the most. They did all that damage, all that scheming, all that lying, and in the end, you grew, you thrived, and they're still stuck in the same cycle, chasing shadows, haunted by a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. My dear chosen ones, this is your power. You don't need to clap back. You don't need to scream your truth. Your evolution is louder than their gossip. Your growth is louder than their narratives. And your light? It's the kind of truth that can't be buried. Not now, not ever. This is the part where the tables don't just turn, they flip. Because you're not a rumor, you're not a reaction, you're not some distorted version of yourself wrapped in someone else's lie. You are the proof, the transformation, the comeback they swore would never happen. And now, every room you enter becomes a courtroom. Every move you make becomes testimony. You don't need witnesses. You are the witness. They wanted to erase you, but all they did was etch you deeper into destiny. They handed you the match, thinking you'd burn yourself down. But instead, you burned away everything that wasn't you, and what's left is unstoppable. Let them talk. Let them twist the story, because no matter how many versions they tell, your life is the final word, and it reads like a warning. This is what happens when a chosen one rises, not with vengeance, but with vision, not with hate, but with healing. Not with noise, but with undeniable proof that they were never the victim. They were always the weapon. And that weapon, it doesn't miss. Number 9. They built an army of haters. Now they're the last ones standing. They built a hate parade, and now they're the only one marching. They needed a crowd to attack you. You only needed truth to outlive them. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about the ones who didn't have the courage to confront you, so they built a coalition instead. The ones who couldn't beat your energy face to face, so they whispered in shadows, recruited backup, and painted you as the villain in a story they wrote with lies. Let's be honest, they didn't just come for you. They launched a campaign against you. They built a whole personality around making you look like the problem. They didn't want understanding. They wanted allies. They weren't searching for closure. They were gathering ammunition, because deep down they knew the truth wouldn't hold them up. So they leaned on manipulation to build the illusion of power. They slid into group chats like snakes in suits, sent vague texts disguised as concern, told half-truths dipped in sugar and laced with poison. And the worst part? Some people believed them. People who didn't even know you, people who'd never sat with you, never heard your version, never seen what you went through, but still picked a side like it was fact. Why? Because lies are loud and exciting. Truth is quiet and consistent. And let's be real, chosen one. For a moment, it stung. You saw people turn their back without warning. You were misunderstood in rooms you'd never stepped foot in. judged by strangers who couldn't even spell your name right. You were forced into silence while someone else performed with a script they wrote in bitterness. But here's the beauty in that silence. It aged well, because truth has a way of peeling back masks, even when you're not the one doing the peeling. And now, look around. The same people they weaponized, they're slipping away. Not because you exposed the lies, but because the lies exposed themselves. Slowly, subtly, completely. Because real always reveals fake in time. People started to notice that the story kept changing, that the so-called victim was always the loudest voice in the room, that the person doing all the accusing never had peace, only drama. They started asking, why are they still obsessed? Why haven't they moved on? Why does it always circle back to the same target? You. And without you saying a single word, clarity hit. They remembered how you carried yourself, how you didn't fight dirty, how you didn't clap back, didn't rally your own army, didn't try to cancel anyone. You just kept living, kept rising, kept building something bigger while they were busy trying to burn your name. And that alone made people wonder, if you were the problem, why weren't you the one creating chaos? Because chosen ones don't need to defend their truth. Their life does that for them. And now, the circle they built is cracking. The people they pulled in are ghosting them, one by one, quietly. They're realizing they were never friends, just weapons, just pawns in a personal game of ego and insecurity. And when a liar no longer has an audience, the performance collapses. Now the spotlight is on them, and it's not flattering. The same attention they begged for is now closing in like heat, because people are finally seeing it. The desperation, the jealousy, the obsession. The whole act is unraveling. And guess who's still standing? You, still rising, still glowing, still building, still choosing peace, not pettiness. Still untouched by the lies they swore would destroy you. And that reality, it's louder than anything they ever said. They tried to make you feel small by turning others against you, but all they did was expose how powerful your presence really was. They needed a group to attack what you carried alone. Think about that. They needed volume. You only needed truth. And now they're left with the aftermath of their own scheme. A reputation built on fiction, a room full of silence. No more allies, no more audience, just guilt echoing louder than applause ever did. They thought they were isolating you, but in the end, they exiled themselves. Because no one trusts a storyteller who can't stay consistent. No one follows a leader whose only mission is destruction, and no one respects someone who turns healing into a battlefield. So let them sit in the ruins they built. Let them feel the sting of losing everything they weaponized. That's not revenge. That's reality doing what it does best, leveling the scales without you having to lift a finger. You never needed to prove them wrong. Just keep being right. Chosen one, remember this. The truth doesn't need PR. It just needs time. And when the dust settles, the only thing louder than their lies will be your unshakable rise. Let's keep going. It only gets deeper from here. And that's the irony, chosen one. In trying to ruin you, they revealed themselves. Their biggest mistake wasn't what they said. It was thinking you'd stay down, but you didn't. You rose. You evolved. And now they're left with the silence of their own sabotage. If this hit deep, like the video, subscribe to the channel and drop 77 in the comments if you know you're rising stronger than ever. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. Your peace is louder than their noise. Let them regret you. You just keep becoming undeniable.